Hello and welcome to this astrological forecast for the sign of Taurus for the year of 2025. I strongly recommend using these videos for your rising sign for the greatest accuracy, but you may also use them for your sun and or moon signs if you so desire. What I will first call your attention to in 2025 is the fact that Pluto is now back in Aquarius in your 10th house to stay for almost another 2 decades, deeply transforming your career, public image, reputation, and actions for many years to come. Pluto has been retrograding back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius since March of 2023, but now that transition period is over, with 2025 being the first full year of Pluto in Aquarius. Additionally, Pluto in Aquarius will transform everyone's experience with technology, the collective, and the future. For you, Taurus, the intense changes in your career and public image indicated by Pluto's transit through Aquarius in the coming years will have a lasting effect on your major relationships. On February 23rd, Mars stations direct in Cancer. This represents a turning point in a larger story that has already been going on for months now, linking your 3rd house of communication, travel, and what is familiar to you with your 4th house of home, family, and living situation. Due to Mars retrograde through both of these houses, you have been reconsidering your motivations in these areas since as far back as September or October of 2024. You have also likely had to apply greater effort in one or more of these areas, especially with Mars being opposite Pluto for so much of the retrograde, challenging your actions and motivations to transform. So while February 23rd is, like I said, a significant turning point in this overall story, it is far from over. It will not conclude until at least when Mars leaves its post-retrograde shadow on May 2nd, 2025, if not when it leaves Leo and your 4th house completely on June 17th, 2025. This transit, while perhaps challenging, is not something you should run from. Instead, continue applying your Taurian spirit of consistent hard work in these areas, and know that when all is said and done, your major relationships will be deeply transformed. On March 1st, Venus stations retrograde in Aries in your 12th house. This too represents an ongoing story, but one that does not begin until January of 2025 and does not conclude until May of 2025. It indicates a time of reflection involving both you personally and your relationships. With Venus being your ruling planet, its retrogrades every year and a half are always going to be a time of significant change and turning points in your life. Sometimes a relationship from the past can resurface at this time. This retrograde taking place in both your 12th and 11th houses links your experience of loss, isolation, illness, and transcendence of suffering with your friends, groups, allies, community, hopes, and wishes. You can expect an intensification of these themes, especially during the exact retrograde itself, which takes place from March 1st through April 12th. Additionally, since Venus has an 8-year synodic cycle, meaning Venus retrogrades through almost exactly the same area of the zodiac every 8 years, you can look back to what happened in your life in March and April of 2017 and know that those themes and events will tend to repeat in some way this year during this Venus retrograde. This transit will have a lasting effect on you personally, as well as your work, health, schedule, and day-to-day activities. On March 14th, a lunar eclipse takes place in Virgo, lighting up your 5th house of creative self-expression, children, fun, love, romance, sexuality, and leisurely activities, and indicating fateful developments in this area. In fact, all of March is our first eclipse season this year, a time when great changes beyond our control take place. The lunar nodes have recently shifted to the Virgo-Pisces axis and thus your 5th and 11th house axis, indicating these changes involve not just your aforementioned 5th house of fun, love, and leisurely activities, but also your 11th house of friends, groups, allies, hopes, and wishes. Thus, a new theme now begins involving fateful changes in these areas lasting for at least another year and a half. However, the previous theme is not quite finished yet, with the following solar eclipse on March 29th taking place in Aries in your 12th house of loss, isolation, and transcendence of suffering. The good news is that this marks the end of these perhaps more difficult eclipses you have been experiencing for the past 2 years. On June 9th, Jupiter ingresses into Cancer and your 3rd house of communication, travel, and what is familiar to you, indicating a period of growth, expansion, and good fortune in this area of your life for the rest of the year, especially if you were born during the daytime. With Jupiter ruling your 8th and 11th houses, the topics of shared resources, issues of life and death, friends, and groups may be part of this good fortune. You may notice in the chart on screen, however, that as Jupiter makes this ingress, it is also square to Saturn and Aries in your 12th house, indicating that the growth or expansion in your communication, travel, or what is familiar to you may push against the limits of your experience of loss, isolation, or suffering. For example, an increase of regular communication or travel may cause ongoing stress by limiting one's alone time. I wouldn't worry too much about this, however, as with a little care and proper boundary setting, this growth can very much be kept in check without threatening other areas of your life. In addition to friends and shared resources, this transit may have a lasting effect on your beliefs and reputation. On July 13th, Saturn stations retrograde conjunct Neptune in Aries. The ingress of both Saturn and Neptune into Aries represents a huge shift that makes 2025 a year of far greater change than most other years. However, it is still a transition period as both planets return to Pisces by the end of the year and won't be in Aries to stay until 2026. Specifically, Neptune will enter Aries on March 30th and be there until it returns to Pisces on October 22nd. During this time, you will get a taste of Neptune in your 12th house, a planet that so often represents our capacity to transcend the physical self and merge with something far greater. In the 12th house of loss and misfortune, that so often manifests as the transcendence, often through spiritual practice or beliefs, of loss and misfortune. Saturn, on the other hand, will enter Aries on May 24th and remain there until September 1st, during which time you will feel a sense of increased discipline and responsibility for your rising above suffering. When Saturn stations retrograde conjunct Neptune, you will likely find yourself bringing structure and discipline to your spiritual practice, creativity, imagination, and yes, yet again, your transcendence of suffering. Saturn will be within a 1-degree orb of Neptune from June 9th through August 4th, and it is during this time that the effects of the transit will be most intense. It will have a lasting impact on your beliefs, reputation, and friends. On September 6th, the Uranus stations retrograde in Gemini trine Pluto in Aquarius. Similar to Saturn and Neptune, the ingress of Uranus into Gemini this year also marks a huge shift. But also like Saturn and Neptune, it is only a preview of things to come, as Uranus will be back in your sign of Taurus by the end of the year and won't be in Gemini to stay until 2026. Uranus will enter Gemini on July 7th and remain there until it returns to Taurus on November 7th, shaking things up in your money, values, or resources for that 4-month period. When Uranus stations retrograde trine Pluto, you will experience a sudden liberation of repressed fear or desire taking place in your money, values, or resources, as well as your career or public image that has a lasting effect on your major relationships. Uranus will be within a 1-degree orb of Pluto from August 11th through October 28th, during which time the effects of the transit will be at their most intense. Due to the sudden nature of Uranus, however, I would pay particular attention to September 5th, 6th, and 7th, with those being immediately before, during, and after Uranus' exact retrograde station. Speaking of September 7th, that is also the day of a lunar eclipse in Pisces in your 11th house, lighting up your friends, groups, and allies and indicating a period of fateful developments in this area. It is our first proper eclipse of the second eclipse season of the year, which technically runs from August 23rd through September 28th, and again is a time when great and powerful unexpected changes can and do occur. Subsequent to this lunar eclipse, a solar eclipse takes place on September 21st in Virgo in your 5th house of fun, love, children, creative self-expression, sexuality, and leisurely activities, indicating fateful developments involving any of these topics. Keep in mind that even though events signified by eclipses often take place right on or around the exact date of an eclipse, such events can also take place between eclipses, and even between entire eclipse seasons. Eclipses are erratic and often unpredictable in this way. On November 4th, Mars in Sagittarius opposes Uranus in Gemini. While this is not as long-lasting of an event as what I would typically include in a yearly context, it is so potent that it may very well end up defining the entire final quarter of this year, and thus I decided it needed to be included. With Mars in your 8th house forming an opposition to Uranus in your 2nd house, action or motivation in your shared resources challenges your strong desire for financial independence or unique values and ends up affecting your major relationships, your career or reputation, as well as your ability to rise above suffering. For example, your partner's motivation to provide for you financially may be in direct opposition to your own desire for financial independence, resulting potentially, in the worst case scenario, in the loss of the relationship, or, in the best case scenario, in a sudden change to the relationship where new boundaries are set. More generally, when angry Mars opposes unpredictable Uranus, sudden fighting and rebellion can often take place, and we will certainly see this play out on an individual and collective level on or around November 4th. Remember in this scenario that anger does not mean you are doing anything wrong. It is simply an indicator of the need for a boundary. 2025 is a year of great change, and I am not just saying that. Astrologers like myself have had their eye on this year for at least half a decade now due to its powerful indicators of great shifts unlike anything we've seen for many years prior. It is not common at all that in one year we have Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune all changing signs, with Pluto just having changed signs not long before the year began. For you, Taurus, deep changes and transformations of your career and public image have begun with Pluto in Aquarius. It is a time of increased motivation in the first half of the year in your communication, travel, or what is familiar to you, as well as your home, family, or living situation due to the Mars retrograde. Your sense of who you are personally as well as how you relate to others is reconsidered greatly in March and April due to the Venus retrograde. Eclipses stir things up when it comes to both your friends and fun, with the lunar nodes having shifted into the Virgo-Pisces axis. Growth, expansion, and good fortune comes to your communication, travel, or what is familiar to you from June onward due to Jupiter's ingress into Cancer. You become more disciplined in your beliefs or spiritual practice in order to transcend suffering when Saturn conjoins Neptune in Aries. You experience sudden liberation of repressed fear or desire when it comes to your finances and reputation when Uranus trines Pluto. Finally, your urge for unique values or financial independence cannot be held back any longer when Mars opposes Uranus in early November. So I hope you have listened closely to all that I have here said, for 2025 is a year we will never, ever forget.